All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being with us tonight. I am delighted to welcome you to a City Club-sponsored panel discussion about Penn Station. My name is Leila Lokizico. I'm the president of the City Club of New York. The City Club was founded in 1892 as a good government and sound planning civic group committed to working for all New Yorkers. Tonight, we're together for a candid conversation with MTA about Penn Station. I am delighted to be joined by Jamie Torres-Springer. Jamie is MTA President for Construction and Development. He is, and I'm quoting from the MTA's website, responsible for better, faster, and cheaper delivery of the MTA's $55 billion capital plan through innovative management of construction work for subways, buses, commuter rails, bridges, and tunnels. And we're also joined by Peter Matusewitch. Peter Matusewitch is MTA's Senior Vice President and Project CEO for Penn Station Reconstruction and Expansion. And I think it's fair to say that no one knows more about Penn Station than Peter at this particular juncture. Welcome to the two of you, and thank you so much for being with us tonight. We have a lot to cover, a lot to discuss, but before we dig deep into what is very topical, and I will mention it, the City Planning Commission actually announced today their recommendation on the Madison Square Garden special permit. We're going to talk a lot about that. But before that, just to orient our audience tonight, I wanted to give Jamie the opportunity to give us a presentation. So Jamie, I think you have a PowerPoint presentation that you can share with us, and then you can orient us and give us an update of where we are, and then we'll dig into the conversation.
Thank you, Leila. Peter's gonna run the PowerPoint show tonight. Thank you. We're very pleased to be here and spend some time. You know, the City Club is a great organization, and I know that members of the City Club have been taking a particular interest in the future of Penn Station for some time. So it's a great opportunity, as far as we're concerned at the MTA, to talk a little bit about what's in our master plan and where we're at, progressing in the effort to rebuild Penn Station. We're excited to spend some time tonight. I'll try to give an overview fairly quickly and allow us to get to some conversation. So I'm sure everyone here can agree on a bunch of things related to Penn Station. Certainly that reconstructing Penn Station is long overdue, as anyone who uses it knows only too well. And as you mentioned off the top, the recent momentum is great for us at the MTA and at the railroads. Over the last couple of years, the MTA, Amtrak, the owner of the station, and New Jersey Transit is obviously a huge user of the station and a great partner of ours, has created a master plan for the reconstruction of Penn. And that's what I'm going to highlight for you this evening. But there's lots of other action as well, and we're, as we say, pleased that it's really a conversation these days, not about whether to rebuild Penn Station and improve existing Penn, but how exactly we should do it. And we're very excited about that and to be a big part of that. Go ahead, Peter, to the first slide. Excuse me. We start at the railroads and at the MTA. I think very appropriately, with the major issues that impact customers within the station. And everyone here knows these issues as inconveniences, as things that we all are a little, shamed and humiliated by. There's the sort of the famous, quotations and references like scurrying into the city like rats instead of entering like gods. And we all know these sort of claims about the conditions in which people are entering Penn Station. But I also want to emphasize that these are major safety issues. Many on this Zoom will know, we spent an enormous amount of time building out Grand Central Madison and opening it at the beginning of this year, getting it into full revenue service. We can go back into the history of that project, but one thing that really we spent a lot of time on the last few months that made it the most difficult to open was getting the safety issues right: airflow, smoke extraction. We don't have the kind of modern systems in Penn Station that we have in a modern concourse like Grand Central Madison and other modern stations across the country and around the world. That's really a thing that we focus on at the MTA as needing to address in a very urgent way. You see the conditions here. The street entrances have poor visibility. We've all had that experience of people approaching us on the street and when we're standing in front of Penn Station and asking us exactly where Penn Station is. The concourses have low ceilings, inadequate vertical circulation to and from the platforms. Those are the big physical limitations, and their impact is to make crowding severe, as you see in these images. There's no daylight flowing into the station. We have insufficient egress, and the distance to an exit from the center of the station simply doesn't comply with modern building code. So the implication of all this is not just a cramped and uncomfortable rider experience. It's that we have safety issues. We have no smoke reservoir that's sufficiently above head height to make those concourses tenable during a fire event. Lots of big concerns that are all reflected in the layout of the station, which is what's on the next slide. Go ahead, Peter. So as everyone knows, but we don't spend enough time probably looking at it in plan, the station has 2.5 public boarding levels that are squeezed between the street level and the train shed below, as you can see here in the lower level and the upper level. In addition to being highly confusing, the station, because of this, doesn't meet ADA accessibility standards, which is a major priority for the MTA and our railroad partners. And we've seen uncoordinated development by the 3 railroads, which has led to duplicative and really balkanized station operations. What you can see in this image, in addition to all the different areas where passengers wait to board or exit the trains and the station, you can see that the areas in gray, which make up over half of the total station area, are dedicated to station operations and public services, which squeeze out public circulation. The building systems are similarly outdated. They don't meet modern standards for energy efficiency, for fresh air, or for smoke purge during an emergency. So all the major concerns of the existing station. Go ahead, Peter. As I started to say, from our perspective, the station and the reconstruction is all about riders. So we're planning for a mix of passengers and a growth of ridership that the station will handle in the future. The station, as everyone knows, now handles more than twice the number of daily passenger trips that the underground station was designed for in the 1960s, roughly 600,000 daily riders before COVID. We are likely down a little bit from that, but not substantially, and we still are projecting future growth despite all of those trends as we get up to almost 700,000 daily trips. The other thing that you see when you look at these user distributions is that though the station was built originally 110 years ago, largely for intercity travel, it's almost entirely a commuter station now. With Amtrak intercity service accounting for just 6% of the 600,000 daily trips in 2019. And of course, those passengers now mostly board from the great new train hall that we've created across 8th Avenue and Moynihan Station. So our focus is how to improve station conditions for the 600,000 daily riders that use the station, largely commuters and subway users. Next slide. Where are these riders coming from and where are they going? This, again, it's really critical for how we created the master plan and where we focused our energies in the station. There's a 70-30 split between east, the 7th Avenue side of the station, and west, the 8th Avenue side of the station. As you can see at the top, for people who are walking, for people who are entering the station from 7th Avenue or 8th Avenue. And this, by the way, is in the future. This is the future condition, even with the build out of more development on the west side. Really, it's East Midtown that drives station use now and in the future. It's a similar condition for subway users. You see roughly 70% using the Herald Square lines or the 7th Avenue line, and 30% using the 8th Avenue line, the A, C, and E. The focus is roughly a 70-30 focus on the 7th Avenue side of the station. Go ahead, Peter. This is also mirrored in the boarding of trains, where you can see that, again, 2/3 are boarding on the east side of the station, 1/3 are boarding on the west side. And that includes Amtrak users. This is I think a graphic from, or a survey from before Moynihan was open. So we know that there's now even fewer passengers that are entering on the 8th Avenue side of the station than 30%. So the upshot of all this is, as we focus on where we can create transportation benefits, the real action is on the lower level and on the east side of the station. Next slide. The good news is that from all these problems I've described, we can fix them, and we can do it now. We have two good examples built by New York State in the last few years: Moynihan Train Hall and the Long Island Railroad Concourse that we recently completed underneath 33rd Street, which is a great addition to the station, and I think really has opened people's eyes to how great the station can be. These improvements are pretty straightforward. We create height, significant amounts of height. And that's not only creating a sense of, a sense of comfort within the station for passengers, it also provides for safety, as I described before. We bring in natural light. We add vertical circulation up and down to the street in as many places as possible, and vertical circulation elements down to the platforms. And we implement new wayfinding strategies that are much more modern than what we have in the existing station. Those are the keys to really improving Penn Station, and it's the focus of the master plan that we've developed. Go ahead, Peter. So turning to that set of solutions that we have in the master plan, it really revolves around a single level station. You can see this in the graphic on the right. We remove the cramped upper levels and locate essentially all boarding and alighting of passengers and most public facing services, including retail, on the lower level. By removing those upper levels, we create a significant amount of head height in all of the concourse and all the pedestrian space. And we also create, as you can see, a ton more circulation space for passengers, which is in the light color on this graphic. Horizontally, the lower level grows to 240,000 square feet, which is about 4 football fields. Vertically, the lowest height in the station would be 18 feet, which is the height of the Long Island Railroad Concourse that I was showing a minute ago. And we're also adding 29 new escalators, elevators to get down to the platforms, which is an expansion of roughly 30%. So it's really an opportunity to move people around the station in a much more comfortable way and create a much better environment. A great station needs a great train hall where the passengers are. And actually, just go back one second, Peter. I'll just point it out on the plan before we look at the rendering of it. But you can see on the right, we are locating a mid-block train hall closest to 7th Avenue. That's the sort of big light area on the right. It's underneath the unused taxiway, the taxiway next to Madison Square Garden that hasn't been used since 9/11. And we're able to get to heights in the order of 100 feet in that mid-block train hall. So a rendering is next, which shows you what that could look like. We're just at the beginning of design. This is just a really, a look at what this could look like. You see the train hall occupying 2 city blocks from 33rd Street to 31st Street. It becomes the central architectural feature of the station for 70% of passengers to pass through. And it also provides easily reached high capacity exits where they're most needed. So we're tremendously excited about the opportunity to create a train hall in the location where the passengers want to be. On to the next slide, I'll just give you a couple more looks at the master plan before wrapping up. That train hall is 75% larger than the 2 areas that you see here, the areas of Moynihan and the Great Hall at Grand Central combined. So it's a tremendous amenity, and rightly so, because that's this is the busiest station in North America, and it's the location where you're going to see the vast majority of passengers pass through. Go ahead, Peter. As we said, the Madison Square Garden bridge that sits on top of the taxiway can be reconfigured to become part of the visual composition of the train hall, which maximizes daylight into the station. You can see the bridge reconstructed in the center of this image here. Go ahead. And looking at a few other imaginings of where we're going with the master plan, there's a new central boulevard of the station running from west to east, which is replacing today's dingy Hilton corridor that many of us have struggled through. That's in the middle of the station. And this is our opportunity to rebuild it with a double height ceiling that provides clear sight lines all the way across the station and include lots of retail in that location. Go ahead, Peter. The master plan also pays attention to the 8th Avenue side of the station with new entrances at both corners and a unifying architectural treatment on the back wall of the Hulu Theater, which sits in the middle of this image. Go ahead to the next slide, Peter. Another image of what this looks like at 33rd Street. And I just want to emphasize the reason that we're focused on the 2 corner entrances is that 32nd Street doesn't run west of 7th Avenue. So, basically across the street from the center of Penn Station, where the Hulu Theater is the post office, the US Post Office. Even the entrance to Moynihan Station is really at 33rd Street. But when people are walking to and from Hudson Yards, at street level, they're coming down 31st Street and 33rd Street. And so our focus has been on building great entrances in that location. And then, certainly very important to enliven that dead zone that's in between them with treatment of the Hulu Theater. And we actually saw, as I understand it, with some submissions to city planning, that MSG is thinking that same way. But, the opportunity here really, next slide, Peter, is creating 16,000 square feet of entrance halls at the corners. This is an image of what the 33rd Street entrance hall would look like. Again, really where people want to go. Go ahead. Another opportunity, just actually building a train hall at 8th Avenue below grade that connects those 2 entrance halls together. Go ahead. Just get into implementation a little bit, but I'm sure we'll have a conversation about it. We have been asked by the City Planning Commission to provide some input as to what would make Madison Square Garden compatible with Penn Station. And we've been excited to have that opportunity to do that. And we're excited by the actions that the city appears to be taking this week. What we've said is that in order to ensure that compatibility, we need certain changes from Madison Square Garden that will support the plan that we just walked through. And in particular, it's that unused taxiway that you see highlighted in red in the plans that MSG submitted. That it's today, nothing is happening on that taxiway. It's been closed since 9/11, and that unused area can be returned to public use as a part of the mid-block train hall. Same thing with the 8th Avenue entrances that you see on the left, which are controlled by Madison Square Garden today, but it makes sense for us to reconstruct them as joint entrances to both the station and the garden. And there's a number of other changes that we've described in some detail at previous events that we're excited about, discussing further and obtaining commitments on. Last thing I'll just say on the last slide, just a couple of things about how we're approaching the project and what funding looks like. So the governor, I think the week before last, announced, along with local elected officials, that we were proceeding into the design phase from the master plan. That was, we had a competitive procurement and brought a team consisting of WSP, FX Collaborative, and the architect John McCaslin, who is involved in rebuilding King's Cross, which is a very analogous station in London. So that team is getting mobilized now. And during this phase that we're in to complete this preliminary design, the railroads have agreed to split the costs. And we're seeking federal funding of up to 50% of those preliminary design costs. As we move into the project delivery phase, we have, first of all, New York State has appropriated $1.3 billion for local funding. We would certainly be seeking, to share funding amongst the railroads. And then Penn Reconstruction is a project that will be seeking additional federal funding. It's a good candidate. It's been announced that it's on the FRA's Northeast Corridor Project Inventory, which is the priority list, and we'll be seeking additional sources of funding and financing from the federal government as we work our way through the environmental process and the design process and get to construction on this project. That's a high-level summary. This is sort of, some of the renderings that we've just shown. We're pretty confident that this master plan would transform Penn Station into a civic space that's worthy of this region and this city, and we're excited to move forward with it. Happy to have some conversation about it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, really, for agreeing to our invitation. Maybe we can actually stop sharing the screen so we can enter the conversation itself. So, my first question is going to be very topical. The City Planning Commission announced this afternoon that they are going to recommend a 10-year permit for Madison Square Garden. What is your take on that? Is it good? Is it bad? Could it be better? And what impact does it have on your pursuing negotiations with MSG?
Sure. I want to make very clear that it is the city's decision as to what to do about Madison Square Garden remaining on the site, operating an arena of its size on the site. We were asked by the city, invited to comment on the opportunity for compatibility, and we've been very clear about what that opportunity is. I believe, I'm not fully up to speed. I believe the Planning Commission is voting this week, but as you say, from what we understand, we can be pleased that the commission is recommending that MSG be required to work with the MTA and other transit agencies to ensure that the arena becomes compatible with a world-class Penn Station. There's lots of ways of getting there. So, the city will make its decisions related to term and extension of the special permit. And, what's most important for us, and I think, most stakeholders really, or all stakeholders really, share this concern is, not my concern whether Madison Square Garden stays or goes. I know other people have very strong opinions about it. The point for us as the railroads that control Penn Station and are trying to rebuild it for all those users is that their remaining should be tied to there being significant benefits. So, to the extent that we're able to negotiate for those or obtain those, we're pleased, and we're pleased that the commission has outlined that.
So just to stay on this topic a little more, I know that people have lots of questions. The compatibility report that was issued by the three railroads was very significant, and it underscores a number of concerns. The compatibility really ties it into the safety issue at Penn Station, and it notes that the safety issue is not only at the concourse level but at the platform level. If I understand the plan that you just presented to us tonight, you're actually not doing much at the platform level, and we understand that the columns that actually support MSG are one of the big limitations and impediments to actually, bring the train station in conformity with, fire code, NFPA 130, which is, the national fire norm that currently the station does not meet. Can you speak to that? Because I think we all agree that, if MSG could stay in an ideal world, yeah, it makes sense to have an arena next to a train station. But the reality is that it's actually really a big problem. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I actually want to ask Peter to speak to that because he's got, as you said at the beginning, he's got a lot of expertise. I want to be clear that what we're, making clear is that we do think that the arena can become compatible with Penn Station. And this is one of the ways that the arena can become compatible.
Peter, what are your thoughts?
Specifically about the physical problems in the station?
Platform level work and
MSG. About platform level safety issues and how they relate to Madison Square Garden.
Okay. The key safety issue with the platforms is there aren't enough stairs and escalators and elevators to get people off promptly. There's a national standard that you have to be able to clear the platform in 4 minutes in an emergency situation, and we can't do that currently. But accounting for a 30% increase in the number of stairs, elevators, and escalators that we can achieve without moving Madison Square Garden, and accounting for the fact that there are 40 additional stairs, escalators, and elevators that go up into Moynihan, we can meet that standard. So we can make the platforms safe from the point of view of evacuation, and we plan to do that.
And now, how are you able to accomplish that, given that the platforms are already incredibly cluttered, and especially for the platforms that serve New Jersey Transit, the platforms that are, to the south of the station, because they are narrower, more encumbered by columns, because, it's just the physical nature of things that, columns tend to be on the outside of the building and, less so in the middle of the building. So a lot of them are on these particular platforms, and these platforms are actually shorter than the others. So how do you fix this mess, and what kind of an agreement negotiation do you need from MSG to actually accomplish that?
Okay, so we are not planning on removing a large number of columns. The two platforms that New Jersey Transit uses, which are short, as you know, need to be extended, and they will be. That probably will not be done as part of this project, but as part of the project to expand the train capacity of Penn Station, because that's where all the work in the train shed will happen. However we expand that capacity, however we choose to, that's a process we're still studying right now, and we'll have to go through an environmental process. Whatever that solution is, it will include extending of those platforms. That nobody likes the narrow platforms. Everybody hates them. That's true. But really what happens on the platform is people get out of the trains and they head to the nearest stair or escalator. One of the problems they run into is if they have to walk a significant distance along the narrow platforms, that's very uncomfortable. So we address that by putting more stairs, escalators, and elevators on the platform. People don't have to walk very far on those narrow platforms at all. You come out of the door of the train, you're very close to a vertical circulation element. You go straight up.
Okay, so just to help the audience also understand what's going on at Penn, it is important to recognize that there are two separate yet very much interconnected projects for Penn Station. There is what we refer to as the Penn Station Reconstruction, which basically will happen entirely within the footprint of the existing Penn Station, with some possible intrusions into a taxiway that currently is in, at grade area that, may be expanded into and converted into an atrium. But basically we're staying within the footprint of the existing Penn Station. And then separate of that, but totally interconnected to that, is a expansion project that is really a capacity expansion project that we understand is driven more by Amtrak, and that the main goal is actually to provide additional capacity for Penn Station. And from what we understand in the course of those past 3 years of discussing this issue and reviewing those various projects, the preferred alternative as it is presented to us, and I will let you correct me if my statement is not totally accurate, but the preferred alternative is an expansion to the south of Penn Station. And that has caused a lot of controversy, because in order to build this expansion to the south, it would require taking Block 780 through eminent domain condemnation and demolishing this block entirely, and demolishing a third of each block on each side of Block 780. So, a third to the east, a third to the west. This project, the expansion, is a separate project, but once again, very much interconnected. And once again, if I understand correctly, Peter, you're overseeing both. You're overseeing both the expansion and the reconstruction. And I see Jamie shaking his head.
No, yeah, thanks for clarifying that, Leila. So this is all. I mean, there's a partnership between the railroads for all of this work, but we're focused on Penn reconstruction, and that's what you invited us to talk about tonight. Penn expansion is an important project that certainly the MTA will be part of, but that's not being led by the MTA.
Got it. Okay. Okay. That's very helpful.
And think of it like, because Gateway is such an important project for the region, and in order to, really make use of the Gateway tunnels, you need the expansion. So think of it as part of Gateway. Whereas what we're focused on is the 600,000 daily users of Penn Station today, and we're trying to improve that experience for those folks.
Yeah, okay, that's very useful and important for people to really frame the conversation. You know, one is not necessarily the other, and one can happen independent of the other. But it is true at the same time that they are very much interconnected. You know, we're talking about the same tracks, you know, that will serve, you know, like the purpose of, you know, a train station, which is to move people from point A to point B. Explain to us a little bit how you think about the form of Penn Station when actually the function and the operations have not been determined. And let me refine this question by stating that although we understand that, you know, there's a preferred alternative that, you know, is separate from what you guys are doing, there is an alternative that is known as through running that would actually entirely take place within the footprint of existing pens. So do you need that to be sort of like educated before you can move with the plan to reconstruct Penn? And don't we take the risk that we're going to limit ourselves if we move forward with a design that has not yet totally resolved the functionality and operations of the station?
Well, I just want to be clear that we have 600,000 daily riders today, and our focus is on fixing Penn now. So that's where our focus is. But, you know, the short answer to your question is yes, we do need to resolve that question before we engage in any substantial amount of reconstruction.
Okay, that is very very useful. Now, pivoting a little bit about some of the assumptions that you have presented. So you explained to us that 70% of users of Penn Station want to go to the east side, whereas 30% want to go to the west side. At the same time, if I understand the visuals that you have shown to us, it looks like you have made additional design propositions for 8th Avenue. Is that a correct description of the design as it stands today?
Yeah, for sure. We need to look at this whole station. We have the whole block from you know, the super block from 7th Avenue to 8th Avenue, 33rd Street to 31st Street. And in creating this master plan, the way we approached it was really starting with that user, right? Where is that user going? Where are they coming from? Predominantly, they're using the Herald Square and the 1, 2, 3 subway lines, and they're using Long Island Railroad and New Jersey Transit on the east side of the station. So that's our focus. That's 70% of riders in the future. It's about 80% of riders today. But that doesn't mean that 8th Avenue isn't important. And, you know, as we always emphasize, I mean, this station was built for 200,000 daily riders. We're at 600,000. So we certainly need to recognize that we need to make improvements all over the place. We are able to do that with those very substantial improvements that we're making on the 8th Avenue side. The focus being on the entrances and the entrance halls.
And help us also understand what kind of alterations and improvements are you planning on the 7th Avenue side?
So I think we start by, you know, just describing that we have the improvements we've created so far, which is the gateway entrance at the corner of 33rd Street and 7th Avenue. If you go there today, you know, Vornado is doing work on the facade of 2 Penn, so it's a little bit sort of difficult and confusing, but that entrance is actually amazing. With the 2 long escalators, when you're standing at the bottom, you've got the view of the Empire State Building, so you really know where you are and where you're situated. There's Amtrak and Vornado are rebuilding their entrance at 32nd Street. There are plans, Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, we have, as part of this master plan, rebuilding the New Jersey Transit entrance at 31st Street and 7th Avenue. Yes, Peter? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
And we'll stop calling these entrances by the names of the railroads. It's all just going to be Penn Station. The other thing that's important is that there's a set of transportation improvements as redevelopment occurs in the future that will enhance entrances even further. Our master plan's not dependent on that, but that will yield critically an underground connection between 6th Avenue and 7th Avenue, and another entrance at 34th Street and 7th Avenue.
So that's actually the good segue to start talking about the announcement that the governor made a couple of weeks ago. So on June 26th, she convened a press conference, and she announced two things. She announced that she was opening up the Penn Station design to proposals, and she announced that the Penn Station reconstruction is decoupled from what is known as the GPP, which stands for General Project Plan, which is an acronym that we've been using very liberally to actually describe a real estate proposal to redevelop 6 city blocks around Penn Station. There is a number of public realm improvements that are actually within the footprint of these commercial towers. We have understood very clearly from the number of earnings calls and reports made by Vornado, which is a publicly traded company, that at the moment there is no plan for ground up development, which means that there is no plan for these public realm improvements to be completed. Are you also pivoting and decoupling these improvements? For example, are you planning to just reopen the Gimbel's Passageway, which exists, doesn't need to be rebuilt, so that we can start using this infrastructure independent of the whims of, let's say, the market, to be kind?
So the thing, so I really helpful that you raised that and gave that explanation, Leila. The thing to be most aware of is that nothing that I showed, nothing that we described in the master plan tonight is dependent on future development through that general project plan or otherwise. That is the Penn reconstruction plan. Certainly the general project plan creates additional benefits. As you say, as those footprints of those potential building sites get reconstructed, it adds entrances, it adds connections. That's great. But what the governor was making clear the week before last is that this master plan is proceeding independent of that general project plan. We are in design, moving forward. We intend to identify the sources of funding and financing. We've already got a significant state appropriation that gets us part of the way there. We're prioritized by federal funding sources. We have grant applications in. We're moving forward with this plan, and it provides the benefits that we described.
I'm going to ask the question again. Let me give me another shot. What happens to these improvements? These new entrances that are needed. We all agree that that we need more entrances, we need more connections. Are you decoupling these improvements from the real estate plan?
The master plan that I showed has nothing to do with the real estate plan. So
I understand that, but what I'm asking you is that in this GPP, there are a number of public realm and transit improvements, and I think we all agree they're fairly modest. It's a couple of entrances and the reconstruction of an existing passageway that would be enlarged, but nonetheless they are important, especially as you described that 70% of the traffic wants to go to the east. So are you planning, and I understand not in the context of this the reconstruction proposal, but separate of it, are you entertaining the idea of actually pursuing these improvements?
Well, I think those improvements are tied to the redevelopment of those sites. So that's a good thing. Those improvements get made. It's important for connectivity around the district. I mean, I walk from Herald Square to Penn Station all the time, and nothing I would love more than a great new connection. Those entrances will be great, but the point is we're not dependent on them to make improvements to Penn Station for those 600,000 daily riders. And we're able to modernize the station, provide adequate egress and circulation without those improvements. That's the plan that we're pursuing.
Okay, great. So moving on in terms of the interaction between Penn Station and MSG, maybe going back a little bit to that topic. Another issue that we have not discussed is actually the loading operations of MSG. Can you speak a little bit about the provisions that are made in the proposal that you have for the reconstruction? And I think that this particular visual was actually part of the submission of the compatibility report with this loading area that is depressed, that with an inclined ramp, if I understand the drawing correctly. Can you or Peter speak to that?
Sure. Well, I'll just start to say that thank you for asking that, because it's hard to get to all these details in presenting the plan in a short period of time. But yeah, there's an opportunity here to improve the loading situation in a significant way. And we know that it's a whole variety of things that impact the neighborhood and the feel of the public realm. Some of those things, we know the city's having a conversation with MSG about a transportation management plan, so keeping the trucks elsewhere until they're needed and so on. But the thing that I think drives people crazy is having trucks idling on 33rd Street, in some cases, and by MSG's own acknowledgement, illegally unloading and loading off of 33rd Street, and then sitting adjacent to the taxiway at the corner of 33rd Street and that mid-block, where loading and unloading activities take place. The improvements that are possible through this master plan create an interior loading area that could contain the 7 trucks that are currently, the trucks that are, on average sort of sitting there in the street or adjacent to the taxiway. So bringing that inside is a huge benefit to improving the public realm. And I just want to be clear, we're still at the master plan stage. We're moving into design. There's other interesting ideas out there about how to achieve even more loading opportunities, and we're going to look at them as part of this design. So, we certainly, this is one of the ways that we have a great opportunity to work with MSG, because MSG's loading doesn't work for them. If we go to any other arena, basically in the country, you can see loading schemes that are much more efficient. And that provides a financial return to the owner. So we're looking forward to working with them, because between the property within Penn Station and the property that MSG owns, there's significant opportunities to improve the loading situation.
So can maybe Peter, can you tell us how you accomplish that? Because I know that lots of people have been looking at it and wondering how you make it work. It sounds quite an undertaking.
Sure. In the master plan, we proposed one solution to it. As you say, we provide a new ramp down to an area below grade, partly in the zone that is currently the taxiway, partly in the zone that is Madison Square Garden property to the west of it, and partly in some space that's actually part of Penn Station, owned by Amtrak. We are also looking at making both the Madison Square Garden entrance to load it to their loading area above grade, and Amtrak's entrance to their loading area above grade tall enough for trucks to go straight in. The primary problem at the moment is that trucks tend to be about 13.6, and the entrance clearance is less than that. That's because in the early 1960s, when this was designed, the average major truck was 11 foot 6 inches tall. They're 2 feet taller now. Structurally, it is possible to do. In initial discussions with MSG, they wouldn't consider that. However, in the development of ASTM's plan, apparently MSG has had a change of position on that, because ASTM was proposing to do exactly that. So they've blazed the path for us, and we're going down the path. So we're looking at something quite similar to what ASTM put forward. We have some really cool ideas about it. We actually think we can do better than what the ASTM plan is showing. potentially as many as 10 trucks in there. So
Okay,
we're very pleased that another possibility has opened up here.
So that's really interesting, and we have not yet talked about the ASTM plan, but certainly, this is very much on people's minds. We're going to get to it, but before that, just a little refresher for our attendees who don't necessarily watch those hearings at the City Planning Commission. But the public hearing was actually quite an interesting one, where the engineer for Madison Square Garden really made it clear that they cannot move and alter the loading entrance on 33rd Street or elsewhere, actually, for that matter, because structurally it has all sorts of ripple effects that basically it's not just blowing up and making the door wider. The loading, like the load bearing columns and beams are actually located there, and it basically supports the entire structure. So how do we reconcile that? And our understanding is that the ASTM plan, and we'll get more in detail with that, is able to accomplish a number of alterations, because they are taking the Hulu Theater, which actually has a different name these days, but the theater at Madison Square Garden, which is a theater and not an arena, and is located on 8th with an entrance on 8th Avenue. So can you help us understand that on an engineering level? And sorry for being so technical, but it's kind of like on the technical aspect of things that we can really grasp what is doable and where we can actually push the advocacy.
Certainly.
Go ahead.
Okay. The partner from Severin, the structural engineers for Madison Square Garden, seemed to have confused a couple of things, conflated them, and not sure why, but he did. Because he started out by saying, well, MTA wants to raise the Madison Square Garden Bridge, and you can't do that. And he went into a long explanation of why you can't raise the bridge. The railroads have no interest in raising the Madison Square Garden Bridge. We're interested in reconfiguring it, but not raising it. And the reconfiguring we would be doing is significant. But I would point out that 8 years ago, when Madison Square Garden did a $1 billion renovation of the arena, that included major structural work on the bridge, because they wanted to put a lot of air conditioning equipment on top of it. They had to strengthen it. So structural work on the bridge is certainly possible. We agree with them that raising it is not. And for that reason, we've never suggested raising it. Somehow he also conflated that with the loading entrances, somehow saying that that couldn't be raised either. I don't know why that was said. I don't understand where that confusion came in from, because in the ASTM plan, they are in fact planning to raise the height of the entrances for trucks. Right? You need at least 2 more feet to get trucks in there, and they are planning to get trucks in there. So in fact, it is possible from their perspective to raise those. Our consultants have looked at it as well and agreed it is possible to raise the clearance there. It's a lot of work, but it can be done. Apparently, Madison Square Garden has already agreed to let it be done.
Does it require to acquire the Hulu Theater?
No. What they're acquiring, the advantage for them, excuse me, of acquiring the Hulu Theater, is that a significant portion of Madison Square Garden's internal loading area was repurposed with new HVAC equipment that serves the Hulu Theater. And by taking the Hulu Theater, they can get rid of that HVAC equipment, opening up the original space for loading in Madison Square Garden. We have a plan to relocate that HVAC equipment outside of that loading area so that we can make that space available for loading as well. In other words, we can accomplish the same thing without having to spend $500 million buying the Hulu Theater.
Okay, so basically you're buying just a tiny bit and they want to buy the whole thing, and you're basically saying all you need is this tiny area. You don't need to get into this complicated acquisition and very, major and involved acquisition. Is that a clear description of what the different approaches are?
Yeah, there would be no property acquisition to do the loading in the scheme that we're looking at.
Right, it's Madison Square Garden's loading, remember, Leila.
Yeah.
It's not the station's loading. So if, as Peter's saying, if accomplishing our master plan is a way of improving the situation for MSG, that's great. We're providing benefits for them. And all we would ask in that circumstance is that there be, an agreement about how to fund those benefits in proportion to, who benefits. So it's a great opportunity, just to be clear. I mean, this is a classic sort of creating value for both public and private entities and finding ways to share in that value creation.
So the ASTM plan, has received a lot of coverage, since it became public, I guess, in April. You have been critical of it. Can you explain to us why? And then we're going to get into, maybe more, details as to, which bits are problematic, which bits maybe are, present some value to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as we've said, I think at a high level, it's great that there's a lot of interest and attention being paid to Penn. And I said it at the beginning, it's not any longer whether we should do something with Penn, it's how we should do it. And we're really pleased and excited about that. As Peter says, there's, all aspects of these different proposals is worth reviewing and looking at. We're actually committed to doing that. Evaluating things like the loading scheme that's been proposed, and Peter is clearly showing you that we've already started to look closely at it. And that's great. They're sort of, you can spend a lot of time on it, and sort of, because there's different things about that proposal. There's sort of what you build, there's what model you use to build it, and then how you pay for it. But just in terms of what you build, as we understand it, it's really the master plan that the railroads have for Penn, plus adding a larger train hall on the 8th Avenue side in the middle of the block. And, there's value to that. There's no question about it, particularly, from sort of an architectural point of view. People can sort of say, we like, taking the middle of that block and not having, even a well-clad, facade. We want something else there. For us, the concern is just whether that's a good use of public funds, because it requires anywhere from, I've heard, $500 million to $1 billion of paying Madison Square Garden for a property. That's a theater's active theater. It generates revenue for MSG. That's their, it's not like the taxiway. Nothing's happening in the taxiway. Nothing's happened in the taxiway for over 20 years. Same thing with the 8th Avenue entrances. That can be repositioned to suit the same purpose. The Hulu Theater would have to be acquired to become a train hall. You clearly have to pay Madison Square Garden for it. And then you'd have to detach all of the infrastructure within the theater from the arena, because everything's built in an interconnected way, and then turn it into a train hall. That's, we think, again, we don't have a lot of details, but between $1 and $2 billion. And for us, here at the MTA, and I know so many of the City Club members, support this, our overall approach, 80% of our budget is on state of good repair to keep the trains running. And so if we have $1 billion or $2 billion, extra, and I'm not sure that we would, but if we did, we would spend it on, state of good repair or making improvements to the rest of the system to keep the trains running on time or to enhance the system. And so it's just a question of priorities. It's not a question of, passing judgment about these various attributes. And again, 70% of passengers will be well served by the mid-block train hall. So that's where we choose to invest our energy.
So their price tag on the train station, on the reconstruction, is $6 billion. The price tag that you have announced is $7 billion, but it has moved a little bit lately with more of a range that goes from 7 to 10. Or is
No.
it's still 7? Okay, it's
Never-
still
we never
7.
said 10, no.
So they claim that they can build this, this whole package for 6, and you want to build it for 7. In the end, why do we have to care that out of the 6 billion that they want to spend, some of it is going to be for acquisition of property?
Well, there's a few answers there. I mean, first of all, just to, like, anyone can come up with a number and say that that's the cost of doing something. That doesn't mean that that is the cost of doing it, right? I can't comment on a $6 billion estimate. We prepare estimates that are consistent with how the Federal Railroad Authority would look at it. Because we know that we're going to have to go through environmental review, we're going to have to go through the grant making process, the financing process, and we're just going through this with the next phase of Second Avenue Subway. There is an extremely rigorous look at how we come up with cost estimates. So our 7 billion, we can be confident it's fully loaded with all the potential costs accompanied by rebuilding a station while it's running, which is a huge operational expense, for example. Having said that, if there's a way to rebuild Penn for less than what we've estimated, we welcome that. And I just, the group we're talking about is a great contracting partner for the MTA. They did a great job for us on Third Track on Long Island. They're doing a good job for us despite some sort of external challenges on the Metro North Penn Station Access project. And so, we welcome when we get to the end of our design phase and there are proposals for delivering the project. We certainly welcome that bid, that proposal, and look forward to taking advantage of those cost savings.
So let's pause a little bit there. Their business model is different. They are proposing what is known in the industry as a P3, which stands for public-private partnership. And P3s can be all sorts of different shapes and flavors. Actually, the Vornado plan was actually presented as a P3, although I think the partnership was, or the capture of the value. I mean, this is open to debate, and people know where I stand on that. I really felt that the value was captured by the private entity rather than by the public sector. In that particular instance, it's a different type of P3 where they are putting equity. They are doing the acquisition, and then they want a concession. So does not that provide some benefit to the taxpayers? Because in the end, they're on the hook. If they go over budget, it's on them. Whereas when a project that is run by the MTA goes over budget, it's actually on taxpayers. And we've seen what happened with East Side Access. It was sort of like the poster child of really what we don't want to repeat of.
Yeah, really good questions. And again, I started to say it, but I just, it's really important to differentiate between different aspects of a proposal. So there's what you build. That there's a proposal. There's our master plan. As we said, there's a proposal to basically add to that building a grand train hall on 8th Avenue. Okay, we talked about that. There's how you pay for it. And we're working on our funding and financing strategy over the next year. But typically we need to go and find public capital dollars to make these investments. But we are going to look actually at the P3 model to see whether there's some benefit to that. But then there's how you deliver a project, and the P3 model has some limitations that concern us just off the top. We're not, entirely opposed to it. In fact, we're very proud we awarded at the end of last year our first P3 at the MTA to make 8 stations in our subway system ADA accessible. And guess what? We awarded it to that firm, ASTM. So there are some virtues to it. So I just want to be clear about 2 things. Number one, it doesn't mean that you have to build a different project. We can deliver our project that has the greatest transportation benefit through whatever means we decide on. But the second thing is that P3s, as you said, Layla, very well, they come in different varieties and flavors. And I don't think, to my knowledge, that anyone, and this is where I get a little concerned about misinformation, because I don't think that anyone is proposing what's called a revenue P3. I don't think anyone is saying, I'm going to put in private equity and there's money that's going to come. This is how often toll highways get built in other countries, right? I'm going to put this in, then I'm going to charge tolls, and the tolls are going to pay for my investment. No one is proposing to toll Penn Station. The proposal is just to put in private equity, but have the government pay off that private equity. And guess what? That's more expensive than if we build it through our conventional design build model. Often, usually something like 50% more expensive, because, I don't want to get into sort of detailed financial arguments, but just an equity return is usually 6, 7, 8% more every year than the cost of the capital, the public capital that goes into a project. So, there are virtues to it. It is more expensive. We're doing a great job of delivering projects at the MTA, and we don't think that, we always need to offset risk in this privatized manner. But even if we did decide to do it, it doesn't mean that we have to build a different project. We can still build a project that has the greatest transportation benefits. Thank you for letting me explain that. It's
no.
Very complex, and there's a lot of misinformation out there about it. So I appreciate, getting uninterrupted time to.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I hope that, our audience is staying with us. I know that it's very technical, but I actually have a follow-up question, Jamie. A number of infrastructure projects in Manhattan have been built in the past with what one could argue are P3 types of models. Moynihan is one of them, and Hudson Yards is another one of them, where basically you are making a partnership with the private sector, in this case, a developer, that from the tax revenue that this development that the developer is creating for their own private benefit, then you skim off some of this tax revenue, and this tax revenue then is used to perform some upgrades. In Hudson Yards, it was to build an extension to a subway line, and for Moynihan, this was just to convert the existing building into a train hall. The shortfall of that is that, and this is why we were, raising hell with the GPP, is that it makes for a very uncertain type of P3, where basically if the tax revenue is not coming in, then you're out of your money. You had to pay your contractor, you had to get your loan, you had to get all your financing in place, and your revenue is not coming in because there's nothing built and there's no tax being paid. So in the case of Penn Station Reconstruction, it looks like we have avoided this. The governor said that she's decoupling. So the tax revenue from these towers that may or may not be built is not going to be leveraged, is not going to be bonded against to build Penn Station. But at the same time, it means that funding is going to have to come from somewhere else. So we're pleased to see that there is funding in the various federal grant programs, and also the loan programs that come from the federal government. But in the case, for example, of Moynihan, which people see as a success, the financial model was actually quite problematic when you think about it. Wouldn't you agree with that?
I'm not going to comment on the structure for Moynihan. Sorry.
Okay.
But
fair.
I will say I'm glad you're raising the point this way, because one sort of piece of clarity is it's true that there are these kinds of P3s that again are called revenue P3s, right? Where there's some new revenue that's being generated through the public-private partnership, and that can get pledged, right? That supports the private capital that gets put in. Sometimes it's going to get backstopped, as in Hudson Yards, and it ends up costing the government a lot of money. In that case, it costs the city a lot of money over time, but fine. That's not the case at Penn. The Penn, any proposal for a P3 is an availability model, which just means the government has to come up with the money. And guess what? The government has to come up with all the money up front. We can't enter into an agreement with anyone to build something for us for $6 billion or $7 billion or whatever it is and say, just get started and we'll find the money later. I mean, I don't think the taxpayer would be very comfortable with that. We need to find all the money up front. So all that structure does is cost us more money, because we have to pay interest and a return on equity over time. So thank you, because it's really not analogous to that idea of some new pot of money that doesn't exist being pledged to this specific project and making it all magically work.
So can we make the assumption then that the funding is there for the Penn reconstruction?
Well, we're pursuing this project the way we've pursued all of these projects in the past, which is we have a significant amount of funding available, $1.3 billion in state appropriation. We have funding for the stage that we're in. So we have, as I described earlier, an agreement to evenly split the cost of this design stage between the 3 railroads. And we're moving and we're identifying the funding sources that are available. This is, how you get a project built and don't have to wait, and be paralyzed by the fact that it's difficult to come up with public dollars for it. But typically, a project like this does receive a significant amount of federal funding. And I'll just give you an analogy, just because we're in the midst of it. The Metro North Penn Access project, which is bringing Metro North into Penn Station, great project along, the East Bronx, which is a real transit desert, adding 4 stations there and really rebuilding Amtrak's Hellgate line in order to do it. We found the dollars in order to proceed with that project, and we awarded the contract in late 2021. And we're right now waiting for a decision from the federal government related to a grant application for that project. So, you just gotta figure out a way to get these things done. And that's what we're doing at the MTA.
And you can say comfortably that you do not rely on the GPP on the Vornado Towers to move forward with your funding and financing for the Penn Station reconstruction.
I mean, I think what the governor was saying was that that's a resource that's been, created through that action by the state, and it's available to the overall project of reconstruction and expansion. But, as you say, there's no expectation that, commercial development will occur in the near term. So, it can't be relied on in the near term.
Okay, so moving on, and thank you so much for really, going down this rabbit hole with me.
Thank you. It's great to get into this level of detail. I mean, it's not easy to do it in a lot of forums. So we appreciate it, and we're glad we still have 124 people, willing to listen to this.
I know, and I actually thank you actually for taking the time to acknowledge we are joined by 120 people who are with us tonight, and I want to thank you for being here, staying with us. I hope you find this conversation to be interesting. I want to name a couple of people by name because I really want to give them a shout out. We are actually joined by the chairman of the City Club, Ken Barwick. So thank you, Ken, for being with us tonight. I want to acknowledge that we're also joined by Liam Blank. Liam became the chair of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee of the City Club, a committee that is brand new, and we really look forward to working with Liam on all these great transportation and infrastructure issues in New York City and the region. And we also joined by Vukan Vucic, who is an eminence and in the field of engineering and has been a staunch advocate for through running. So I just wanted to give a shout out. Moving back to our conversation, so we understand that you need a number of maybe should we call them easements? Actually, are you expecting it to get an easement from Madison Square Garden? What exactly is the elements that you're pursuing in your negotiation with MSG?
So there's a few things that we need to collaborate on. There is a transfer of property interests for the unused taxiway and the 8th Avenue entrances, which are they're definitely underused, but they would still serve their same purpose after that. It's actually a swap of property interest because the loading that we were talking about involves transferring some railroad-owned property to MSG for its loading. So that's an important, opportunity to work together on that. There's some things that, in the sort of basically around the station that need to get out of our way, the sort of, pieces of equipment and things like that. Permissions, opportunities to, modify certain columns at the platform level and that sort of thing. We talked about that a little bit earlier. And then there are parts of our plan that produce joint benefits. And so it's not our proposal that somehow MSG should pay for, the public improvement of the station. But, for example, where in our plan, in order to create the space for the plan that we talked about, we need to reconstruct the loading for MSG. It would be reasonable, since they'll benefit from that, to expect a contribution from that. And so that's what we've described, not a subsidy from MSG to the government, but sort of unused property and sharing in some costs in association with benefits, but definitely not a subsidy from the government to MSG.
Okay. And if we understand correctly, and it was quite visible during the public hearing at the City Planning Commission, it looks like this the realm of an agreement is not quite there yet. And that was, like what, 3 weeks ago. Can you actually speak to where you are today in the negotiations? Certainly, we appreciate that you're not going to divulge any secrets, and those things are better played close to the chest. But can you give us a little bit of the flavor of the conversations you're having with them?
We haven't had cooperation from Madison Square Garden in coming to an agreement. I think everyone heard at the Planning Commission, they sort of said they didn't feel that we had enough design worked out to to even look at it. We've had some conversations, but we do think that there's some basics that I described that are possible to commit to now. But, I do want to say that what we're hearing from the Planning Commission and from the city seems to be, to hold MSG, accountable, whether it's before the issuance of the special permit by the city council, or if it's after, once we reach a certain stage of design. As I understand it, they're talking about, that we would need to come back to demonstrate that MSG has achieved compatibility through agreement with us. And that's great. That's a great opportunity for the riders. Okay,
you may have to say that, but I'm, as a stakeholder, and I'm gonna put my CB5 hat on for a quick second, if I'm allowed. I was actually rather underwhelmed. And the one thing that, maybe help us understand how it's going to work, but if in essence you issue a special permit, and the special permit has a term of 10 years, which is, pretty generous. Community Board 5 recommended 3 years, and a number of other civic groups recommended the same amount of time, which we felt was the prudent amount of time to actually really force everybody to stay at the table. Which we feel is what has been missing in the past 10 years. So how does it work? The city council, if they follow the recommendation of the City Planning Commission, is going to issue a special permit for 10 years, and then Madison Square Garden will have to come back and demonstrate that they are compatible. And my question is, or else, what happens to them? Do they get a slap on the wrist or something a little bit more severe?
That's probably a question for city planning, Layla. I'll just say that as I said, we're, provided there's an opportunity, just what we've talked about this in a lot of detail, but, this is not a moment that we should let go to waste, right? There are mutual benefits. There are property interests that provide no value to Madison Square Garden that would provide a huge value to the railroads in the form particularly of that mid-block train hall, where that taxiway is. So we have an opportunity here to do something mutually beneficial, and we don't think any of us should let it go to waste.
To those who say that expecting to use your terms, transfer of property interests, basically it means getting the taxiway for free. Is that simple way to describe the transaction?
Look, again, it's very often this is the way that you get things done, is you look at something that has no or little value to one party that has enormous value to another party, and that's the kind of exchange that you can make. And that's the case in the taxiway. The taxiway, and again, there's a lot of learned folks on watching this. In the 1960s, this was public land and public property. Some decisions were made to distribute those property interests in a certain way to effectuate that, love it or don't love it, Penn District vision in the 1960s. Now if you look at that distribution of property interests, after 9/11, taxiway is not being used. Does it make any sense that, MSG is controlling that property interest? Probably not. So, there's an opportunity here where there's, property that doesn't have value to one party that has a huge amount of value for the public. And that's really what we're talking about.
So the taxiway is actually adjacent to Penn. Penn belongs to Vornado. And there is actually an easement that sort of like within the taxiway that Vornado has given to MSG. And if you start looking at the deed for this super block, it just you can't. It just makes your brain explode. It is so complicated. Do you need to get any transfer of property interest or easements from Vornado?
I don't think we do, but Peter is the one person who can look at all of that and his brain doesn't explode. So Peter, can you confirm? You're on mute.
Yeah, the taxiway property is owned by Madison Square Garden and is encumbered by easements for the use by the public, for the use by the owner of Penn Station, which is Amtrak, and for use by Vornado. Vornado loads their building through the taxiway and 31st Street. And it tangles up even more. MSG has an easement on Vornado property for their VIP entrances, right? So as you say, it's one heck of a tangled thing because when it was developed as an integrated property, which allowed the Pennsylvania Railroad at the time to share in the value that was being created. It was an attempt on their part to increase their revenue and avoid going into bankruptcy. Didn't work. They went into bankruptcy anyway. But it's left us with a very tangled web. And in all situations where you have a tangled web like this, at the end of the day, you have to come to a set of agreements to untangle. So in the end of the day, we need a set of agreements between Amtrak as the owner of the station, MSG is the owner of certain properties, and Vornado as an interested party with easements as well. That is to everybody's interests. It'll take a while to get there, but in the end, you have to put it simply, you have to get to a deal.
So help us understand, if you can, as you gave us a little bit of the color and the flavor of the interaction with MSG. What kind of interaction are you having with Vornado?
Well, lately we have not had discussions of it. Early in the master plan, we did have some discussions, and they were open to various things that we were suggesting. And we've left it there for now. They've been very involved with rebuilding 2 Penn. Obviously, that's where attention is right now. That's fine. We'll come back around to discussions with them at the right time.
And they also built the Northern Concourse, right? The Long Island Railroad Concourse.
They were a private partner to us.
Yeah. Right. But the MTA built the Long Island Railroad Concourse. Yeah, there's some retail along the concourse soon to open, which Vornado will be operating.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And because we were exchanging property interests in that case, and it made sense because we were in each other's laps. Essentially, it made sense for them to be part of the process of construction, to ensure that all the coordination would happen well. It was a very smooth partnership.
Yeah, I was going to say it's it's sort of complicated. I know everyone finds it, sort of mind bending. It's a very complicated set of parties, but Long Island Railroad Concourse has been a huge success in terms of the delivery of that project. And it's because at the MTA, we were able to, bring on a design builder and work with all of the relevant parties in a really efficient way to get it done. We got it done on time. We got it done under budget. And it's a great amenity that really points the way. It's 20% of Penn Station, so it's the other 80%. Sort of shorthand for everything we've been discussing for the last hour and a half is just doing what we did for that 20% for the other 80%.
Okay, that's helpful. Moving on to, I know that there is a lot of interest, lots of questions in the Q&A. I want to thank you all for bringing those great questions. I know we're not going to be able to take all of them, but Jamie and Peter, we may have to do another event. Maybe I know that Community Board 5 is chomping at the bit and would love the opportunity to actually do an event under the umbrella of Community Board 5, if you're still talking to me at the end of this event. But let's try to go through a number of questions that we have in the Q&A. We talked about the ADA issue. Currently, Penn Station is not ADA compliant. Are you planning with this master plan and with this reconstruction project to make the entire station ADA compatible and accessible?
Yes.
Including the platforms?
Peter, you want to add any subtlety to what I'm saying?
Each platform, when we're done, will have at least 2 elevators. And there will be a navigable path from any point on the platform to at least one of those elevators.
Even those platforms that serve track 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are incredibly narrow, incredibly encumbered and cluttered, and with the existing vertical circulation elements, those VCEs that we've been talking about so much in the past 3 years, those elements are actually so bulky that you don't even know what they are. You get off the train and you're faced with a wall, and you don't know that behind this wall is actually the entrance to the staircase. Are you doing some reconfiguration to that? And are you able to narrow that so that people can move around? Because, whether you are, with a suitcase, a stroller, or, a mobility device, a wheelchair or a walker, it's impossible to navigate on these platforms.
Yeah, we're going to improve all of that. And we still have a lot of design work to do. So I can't tell you exactly how we're going to improve all that, but we will.
Okay. I know that, I had made this request 3 years ago. I'm going to make it again. Can we actually do a tour of Penn? Can we actually walk on these platforms together so that you can help us, orient ourselves? And we don't have to bring 126 people with us, but maybe a small group. Would you consider doing that kind of community engagement?
Be happy to.
Awesome. That would be great. So the takeaway to this question is that each platform and the concourse will be ADA accessible.
Yes.
When it's all completed. Okay, great. Another question is, lots of people feel that, as Jamie mentioned, that, Penn Station right now is pretty balkanized with, 3 railroads that are not really working in a unified way. And this project is framed as, a unified Penn Station. At the same time, it seems very much that we're continuing this pattern where Amtrak is in Moynihan, New Jersey Transit will be in the expansion, and then Long Island Railroad and Metro North, when that opens, will occupy the existing Penn. How are you thinking about this unified Penn?
Well, let me point out a couple of things. We're projecting that in the future, close to half of all Amtrak passenger trips will be through the existing Penn Station. These will primarily be people alighting from trains. As you know, people get off the train, they head for the nearest stair or escalator or elevator. And these trains are 1,200 feet long. So a significant number of Amtrak passengers are going to wind up exiting through Penn Station itself. So Amtrak is still very committed to Penn Station. We don't know exactly how many Amtrak passengers will choose to continue boarding from Penn Station. It's certainly likely to be 10 to 20%. So it's still their station. Not only that, but they have many facilities in Penn Station for maintaining the station. They're deeply committed to Penn Station itself. And Long Island Railroad does share Moynihan with them. Only about 10% of Long Island Railroad passengers are using it, but that number may grow. It is certainly true that New Jersey Transit will be the primary user of the expansion, but they're expanding into it. They're still going to need all the tracks they use in Penn Station now. So New Jersey Transit is equally committed to the reconstruction of Penn Station. And of course, basically everybody from MTA facilities will be in the existing station. So all three railroads are completely committed to the reconstruction of Penn Station. It's in all of our interests.
So they are committed, and at the same time, right now, the wayfinding is different. Even the treatment to the entrances into the tracks, from the concourse down to the platforms is different. New Jersey uses these gates that are some bizarre way of welcoming people to board a train. Long Island Railroad is has a variety of treatments of entrance, but pretty consistent with where you are, where the track and platform is. Are you giving that a unified approach? And also on the maintenance, are you going to have a unified maintenance contract for Penn Station? Because currently you have cleaning crews that are dedicated to each part of or to each railroad. I'm not sure how you split the areas, but certainly it's separate.
There's some aspects like this that are to be worked out, but it's certainly the goal that we all share.
The goal is a single unified station. There will be a number of working groups from the railroads thinking through how we unify all those things, but they will. The physical aspects are easy. Making all of the gates down to the platforms unified is very easy to do, and that will be done. Making all the wayfinding uniform will be very easy to do, and we will do that. The railroads have all shown an interest in having a third party managing the station. I don't know if that'll actually come about, but everybody's indicated some interest in that. So we will be looking.
Okay. We have also lots of questions, tying back to the compatibility and the safety. So, I think people are, we're pretty surprised, not surprised, but we all felt that the compatibility report was really very clearly spelling out where the issues are. So I think we've spoken quite a bit about that, but basically you are confident that once MSG agrees to your conditions, you will be able to bring Penn Station to a full compliance with safety norms, evacuation rate, smoke dispersion, and all that good stuff that makes for a safe building.
Yes.
Okay. Something that I've always been very, very reluctant to speak about in public, because I think we need to be extremely careful, is actually, the fact that this is a potential target. I just want to mention it here. I don't even want to ask you any questions, because I think it's a little irresponsible to discuss these issues.
Let's move on. We're not
public, but
we're not going to comment on that. Let's move on to the next question.
Okay. Then we have some questions actually about the ridership assumptions that are being made. You're basically forecasting a drop of almost 10% in New Jersey Transit ridership by 2036? This is the question. Is that the forecast that you're making?
New Jersey Transit ridership will roughly double by 2038, but they will be expanding into the expansion platforms and tracks. And there will be a net drop, a very small net drop in Penn Station. And remember, these are projections. It's not a Swiss watch. You can't take a number like, 2,000, 200,000 and 681 and say, yeah, that's the number in 2038. It's the number we use for planning. We're planning for a relatively small drop in the number of their passengers using the station, but overall a doubling of their ridership.
Okay. And, we haven't really focused too much on the operations because, we're really appreciative that you were here today to talk about the reconstruction. But at the same time, every city in the world is actually approaching rail mobility in a regional unified network type of approach rather than using the terminal model. And yet it looks like New York is really gung-ho on going full-on terminal, whether it is Penn or Grand Central terminal. Are you considering different approaches? Are you planning so that eventually we get to some sort of through running connector? I mean, we know that, the Trenton to Montauk has, no future. We get it. It's, this is not what we're talking about when we talk about through running. But the New Brunswick to Ronkonkoma, two big university centers, the Newark to Jamaica, huge opportunity. Are you thinking about those connectivities as you are planning the reconstruction?
Maybe I'll just say, just in the interest of time, because I know we're a bit over time now, just that, that we know that's an important regional consideration. I mean, our focus is on fixing Penn for those 600,000 riders. That's what we're working on. I know there are other opportunities to explore that, particularly as Gateway gets built and there's an expansion, additional platforms and tracks. Certainly not the only thing that through running would be dependent on. I mean, it would be require a massive investment underneath Manhattan in different ways, but and the East River. But the focus for us is on fixing Penn.
Okay, so it is fair to say that the Penn reconstruction will basically increase capacity at Penn by 0 passengers. You're not able to run more trains. You're not able to bring more passengers. You're not able to take them anywhere else than what they're currently doing. They will just come out at Penn and be in a more pleasant environment.
Well, I think the point is that Penn can't accommodate the 600,000 passengers now. So we're trying to rebuild it so it can accommodate those passengers. And also keep in mind, and this is really important, Metro North Penn access should be complete in 2027. That's going to bring additional trains into existing Penn. So, there certainly is an expansion in service in that regard. And, that's why we're so focused on getting this work done as soon as possible.
Okay. So I think we're getting through most of our questions, actually, which is quite remarkable. I know that there are many more questions, many more issues that people want to discuss. But I really want to be mindful of everybody's time. We're already more than an hour and a half into this conversation. And we actually have not lost that many of our participants. So really very appreciative for all the insights that this conversation has garnered. But we would love to continue this kind of public engagement. I think that there has been quite a bit of craving to hear from the MTA. One question that I haven't asked yet: when are you going to release the master plan? Is that going to be made public?
I think we've gone through a summary of some of the details. The master plan itself, we're still talking to the other railroads about that.
Okay. Okay, great. And I as we wrap up, I want to say once again that we're really very appreciative for this opportunity. I want to make it clear that this came to be really sort of like organically, and the MTA really did not put any conditions whatsoever in organizing this event. I had absolutely free reign. They did not ask me to submit my questions. It was really a wonderful experience, and I think it's worth emphasizing, and I really appreciate the opportunity. So I think we're ready to wrap up. I want to give you, Jamie, and you, Peter, the opportunity to deliver some closing statements to the audience.
Sure. I think we've said it all tonight. We're to your last point, Layla, we're just excited to have an opportunity to talk about this plan and to move this plan forward. I said it, but I'll say it again. We're now fully into design, into what we call preliminary engineering, preliminary design, that allows us to advance the project, deal with some of the difficult engineering and planning questions that you've asked in the course of this conversation. And so we're moving forward. We also are moving forward as soon as we can into environmental review, which needs to run alongside it. So certainly it's our ambition to get to actually building this project in the near future. And we appreciate having the forum to talk to a group like this and share some of our plans. So thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Peter, do you have any parting words for us?
Sure. The purpose of the master plan, excuse me, was to figure out how to make a safe and intuitive station. And I think we've done that very well. We have a world-class design team now that's going to take that framework that we've developed and turn it into, I think, something very special. And I think that people are going to be very impressed by what ultimately emerges from this project.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks,
and
Layla.
We really look forward to following the next steps. I think that everybody is very focused on the environmental review process. I didn't ask you when that is going to start. I guess that there's no clear answer to that, but certainly we're going to continue to be very engaged and very focused. We really appreciate the opportunity to share with you what our thoughts are. I think that we've been pretty loud, and we intend to continue to being loud, but I think that the climate of cooperation and dialogue, I think, is what we value the most. We really are entirely committed to public transit. This is really very, very critical for the city and for the region. So we really appreciate the opportunity to have this in-depth conversation with you tonight. Members of the City Club, thank you so much for allowing me to organize these events. I want to thank the leadership of the City Club. I want to thank all of you who are watching this event. We are still as equal capacity as we were when we began this discussion. This is really a testament to community engagement and public engagement from New Yorkers. We're quite special, and I think that we are accomplishing some important things here. Thank you very much, and I wish you all a very good evening. Good